Okay, so our first lesson today is about finding the percent of a number. So the first thing is it's really important to remember that percents are always out of 100. So our first example, 20% of 300, if we're trying to find 20% of our whole, which is 300, we know that 100% has to be 300. So from there, we can kind of try to figure out a few different ways what 20% would be. So what most people would start with is we're just trying to find different percents of 300. So if we wanted to find what number would be 50% of 300, we could cut 300 in half. So half of 300 would be 150. It's pretty easy enough. If we wanted to go further from that, we might be able to cut this 50%. Some people would cut it into 5 different pieces and make 10%. Some people would cut it in half and make 25%. If we're trying to find what 20% is, it might be easier if we could find what 10% would be, because if we knew what 10% of 300 was, we could easily add 2 of those together and make 20%. So if we divided this 50% into 5 equal pieces, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 equal pieces, we could take that 150 and divide that into 5 equal pieces as well. So 150 divided by 5 is 30. So each of these 10% would be 30. So if we have 10% is 30, 20% would be 60. So 20% of 300 would be 60. There's another way to easily figure this out. And if you're pretty good at converting percents to decimals, that might be a way for you. So 20%, if we remember from converting fractions or converting decimals to percents, 20% is 20 out of 100, which is 20 hundredths as a decimal. 20 hundredths would look like this. And of means multiply. So we could do 20 hundredths times 300. And if I either multiplied that out long ways or did it on my calculator, the answer would also be 60. So that's another easy way to think about finding the percent of a number if you already know the whole. Now, a different type of problem is if we have 12 is 40% of what number? Kind of thinking of the same percent bar model that we were just using. We know that we have 12 and that's 40%. So if this right here is 50%, 40% would probably be about right here. 40%, and we know that that's 12, but we do not know what 100% is. So we're going to try to have to go a different way of thinking about it. So lots of different things. We could just try to get as close to 100% as we could. So if we have 40%, if we add another 40%, so that's about this much. These two are about the same size. If we add another 40%, that would be 80%. And then we add another 12, that would be 24. So we know that 80% of this same number is 24. That's still not going to help us though, because, well, it might help us, but if we added another 40% or added another 40%, that would be 120, which is more than what we need. However, if we kind of look at this though, we need half of 40%. We need 20% to get up to 100%. So if we could think about half of, if each of these 40% is 12, we need half of that, which is 6. If I add 20%, to 80%, then I'm only adding half of this 12, which would be 6. So if I add 6 to 24, that would be 30. Again, kind of a weird way of thinking about it. Another way using the same percent bar model is kind of actually what we did in the last example, where if we scaled backwards a little bit, it might be kind of easy to figure out that way. So if we went from 12, we went from 40%, we need a number that would easily go into 100%. So if we went from 40 back to maybe 10 or even 20, we can just do 20 because 20 is just cutting it in half. So if we had 20%, that would be 6, right? So if each of these, every time we add another 20%, so this would be 60%, we would add another 6. So add 20%, we would add 6. Add 20%, we would add another 6. So this one right here, 60% would be 18. If we add another 20%, we would add 6, that'd be 24. Add another 20%, add another 6, that would be 30 again. Another way, just using decimals if the percent bar model doesn't work for you, you just work well with numbers. Another way we can think about it is, so if we're kind of going off the same way, if we were the same setup, if we were writing an equation, the only problem is we don't know what this number is. We don't know what our whole is, but we could say 40%, which would be 0.04, of some number, I'm just going to put a question mark, is 12. We would just have to figure out what this question mark is. We know that from kind of some of our algebra that we've learned about, we could rewrite this as a division problem. We could rewrite it as 12 divided by 0.40 equals whatever that is. And if I typed in 12 divided by 0.40 on a calculator, I would get 30.